What's happening, everyone, and welcome back to 212 Projects. In the last episode you would have seen us install the Z20 Lite into the Corsa, and although it's been a lot of work to get to this point, we're not finished yet. Next on the list is to get it running, and we've got a few things to do in order for that to happen. First off is the fuel system. The standard Corsa runs what's called a deadhead system or a returnless system, whereas the Z20 Lite uses a return fuel system. So what that means is we need to run a return line from the engine back to the fuel tank, and then we also need to drop a Z20 Lite fuel pump in the tank as well. There's one or two other wee bits and bobs we need to do, but those two are the main components for the fuel system. So I'm going to lay everything out on the table, make sure I've got everything, then I'm going to jump straight into it. So I've got everything laid out on the table. What some people do is they end up running all new lines. That's what I want to do, but I'm on a timescale and a budget, so that wasn't really feasible for me. So what I ended up finding was someone selling a full Z20 Lite fuel line system. So all I need to do is connect up the fuel lines to the engine and then run the return line under the car and then into the tank. I've also got a new fuel filter and my Z20 Lite fuel pump, which I'll throw in the tank as well. So now I'm going to jack up the car and get cracked on. So, we've had a change of plan because that plan doesn't work. Although these are Z20 Lite fuel lines, they're not Corsa fuel lines, so they don't fit. And because they're hard lines, I can't bend them enough to make them fit without snapping them. So what I've done is I've went and bought some fuel line, and I'm going to run new lines instead of trying to make the original lines work. I'm still waiting on the fittings that come off the fuel rail, but what I can do is start from the fuel pump and basically run the lines forward. That way when the fittings get here I can just terminate the lines into the fittings and then that's it done. So let's get into it. Okay, so it's a bit hard to see, but this is also a fuel filter and this is my feed up to the fuel rail, and then this was going to be the return, but we're going to get rid of that. So we're going to come straight off the fuel filter, run a new line all the way up to the feed on the fuel rail, then we're going to run a line from the return on the fuel rail all the way down to here. We're going to take this kind of Y piece off and we're going to join in to this pipe here, which is the return up to the tank. Okay, so we've got the feed off now, so now we can start running the new line from the fuel pump to the fuel rail. Right, so that's the first line ran. I know there's no hose clips on it, but I'm waiting on them coming, and I know it's just cable tied up for now. It's just a temporary measure. I'm waiting on proper clips coming. It will all be done properly. Don't panic. But that is the first line run, so that's it there. So there's enough line left that I can tie it to the firewall and make it look nice and keep it out of the place of everything. But that's the first line run, so I just need to do that again for the return line, and we can move on to the rest of the system. Now the two fuel lines are done, we now need to change the fuel pump from the standard Corsa one to the Z20 Lite. Okay, so we've got the original Corsa pump finally out. That was a lot harder than it absolutely had to be, but now we can swap in the Z20 Lite pump. Also, the standard Corsa has an in-pump fuel pressure regulator, whereas the Z20 Lite has a FPR on the fuel rail itself. So we need to remove this so that the engine's just using the one on the fuel rail and not try to fight between the two of them. So we're going to remove this as well, and then that is everything in the tank complete. So now we've got the in-tank fuel pressure regulator removed, so now we can bin that, and now the system's only going to use the FPR on the fuel rail, which is what we want. So now it's time to build all of this back up and hope it works. So now with the fuel pump changed over to the Z20 Lite, that is the fuel system complete. We can cross that off the list, one system done. So with that crossed off the list, we're slowly working our way through the systems. Now on to the next one, which is going to be the wiring. There's not that much to do on the wiring side of it. We've got a couple of pins to move on the engine harness and the battery cables to extend, and fingers crossed that should be it. So we're going to get cracked onto that next. Okay, so first job on the electrical side is extend the battery cables. The standard Corsa ones aren't long enough to reach the starter, and the Z20 Lite ones aren't long enough to reach the battery, so we need to join the two somehow, and that's going to be first on the list. Ideally I would like to run all new cables, but the Z20 Lite starter loom has got like multiple plugs in it for different systems, and the same as the standard Corsa battery loom, and I hate wiring. I hate it with a passion. So to make my life simpler, I'm just going to join the two, but instead of like joining the two cables with like a joiner, I've got wee junction boxes. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut and terminate the two cables, the two looms, and I'm going to mount these on the firewall. Then we'll use these to extend the cables. In my mind, for this, it's the best way to do it. I might be wrong, probably am wrong, but I'm going to do it this way anyway, and fingers crossed it works. So first job is to see where the two cables lie. So I'm going to install the standard Corsa battery loom and see where that routes. Then I'm going to offer up the Z20 Lite starter loom and see where that goes, and kind of work out the best place to basically join them and then mount the junction boxes. So we're going to get into that. Right, so I think I've worked out where the junction boxes are going to go. I'm going to mount them just there, just under the brake pipes and to the left of the heater channels. I think that's the best place to put them. They're definitely going to be out of the way of the clutch cables and the fuel lines, and I'm almost certain they're going to be out of the way of the heater channels. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to mount these junction boxes on the firewall so I know exactly where to cut the battery cables, and then we're going to cut the battery cables. I mean, I suppose if it does go wrong, I can always make new cables, but I don't really want to go down that route, so fingers crossed it's going to work out alright, and we'll see what happens. So that's one done. We're just going to do exactly the same with the other one, and then we can start cutting cables. So there you go, that's the two junction boxes mounted. They're not perfect, but they're exactly what I need them for. And the nuts and bolts are only temporary, they will get fitted properly, but this is just so I can get a length of the cables so I know where to cut them basically. But it'll do for now. So now we just need to offer up the cables, work out where we need to cut them, and then we can cut them and then terminate them and then get this job finished. Right, I don't know how well we can see that, but I've got the body side battery cables done. Mega happy with how they turned out. It's the first time I've ever done this, and I'm pretty chuffed myself. So I'm going to show you doing one on the starter loom, then I'll get the last one done, and then we are finished this job. So the process for terminating battery cables isn't actually that bad. Just the same as terminating like a speaker wire, it's just a bit thicker. So I was just kind of offering up to get the length of it to work out where to cut it. And then I cut the battery cable, and then I offered up the terminal just to see how far I need to strip back the insulation, so I could then strip that back and expose the bare wire. And then I test fitted the terminal onto the wire just to make sure that I got the length right, and then I could sleeve over some heat shrink just to protect the terminal after it's been crimped on. Next I could then get a hydraulic crimper. Because it's thicker cables, this works great. Crimp the terminal on, nice and tight, nice and snug. Then I could sleeve over the heat shrink and get that melted and shrunk right around it just to protect it. And that is how to terminate a battery cable. So there we have it. The battery cables are done. There's two other wires that need to be joined in the loom, but I'll get that when I do the rest of the wiring, which is the ECU plug wiring. But for someone who hates wiring, I've never done battery cables before, I'm pretty chuffed with that. They're not 100% perfect, but they'll do the job, and I'm happy with that. So next up, like I said, is the ECU plug wiring, but I need to wait for the ECU to come back because I sent that away to get a standard Z20 Elite map on it. So I need to wait for that to come back. Hopefully it's here in the next couple of days, fingers crossed. But for now, we'll put everything back together and we'll crack on to another job to get this thing running. Right, so I got the ECU back and got it mounted onto the firewall. I'm pretty happy with where it is and how it's mounted. So now is the fun job, repinning the ECU plug. As far as I know, there's only maybe 6 wires I need to repin and maybe 1 or 2 wires I need to join or extend. Fingers crossed it shouldn't be that difficult, but we'll see how true that is when I get into it. So fingers crossed I don't mess it up, and let's go. So I have to apologise, I didn't actually film any of the ECU plug wiring, partly because it was quite complicated and I wanted to wrap my head around it, so I got it right, but mainly because I just forgot, so I'm sorry for that. But I did film bits of the wiring, so I'm going to talk you through the bits that I did film. Part of the wiring was I had to swap a plug on the engine side and the body side. I had to chop the old plug off the engine side and then strip the wires back and expose the bare copper. And then I could offer up the new plug, get the corresponding wires joined one by one, and then soldered so they're nice and strong. And of course a bit of heat shrink over the exposed wires just to protect them. After doing that for all the wires, the engine side plug was complete and I could do the same for the body side. But as you can see, it looks a headache and it absolutely was a headache. That's why I didn't film much of it. But once all the wiring was done, I had to clean up what I'd done, so got some good loom tape, wrapped it all up nice and neat. And after doing that nice bit of straight loom, I thought, I'm good at this, I can do a bit more complicated, and I wanted to do this kind of junction section. And it didn't turn out exactly how I wanted it, but it's all protected, it's all nice and tight and neat, and that's good enough for me. After all the wiring was done, it was finally time to plug in the looms to the ECU and plug in all the rest of the plugs and make sure everything was in the right place. Don't come at me for the state of the wiring loom. It's a lot of loom to go in a tight space. It looks a mess, I know that, but it's the best it can be right now. If it works, great, I can tidy it up, but for now I'm happy with it. Right, so now the wiring is done bar one ground wire. I'm going to quickly recap on everything that I've done up until now, because for you it's only been however long this video is until now, but for me it's been about 4 weeks of waiting in parts, doing wee bits of wee jobs, doing other jobs in between the wee jobs, and trying to wrap my mind around the whole wiring side of it, and it's been a nightmare. So to recap for yourselves and more to remind me about what I've done, I'm going to run you through what we've done since we put the Z20 Elite in the car up until now. And then after that you'll see just how close we are to actually turning the key and seeing if the mighty Z20 Elite will fire into life. So the fuel system, we started off with installing the Z20 Lite in-tank fuel pump, and then we moved on to the fuel lines. So we've got a new fuel filter, and then we ended up running all new fuel lines up to the engine bay. So from the fuel pump we ran new lines under the car and up into the engine bay. We've got one new return line that you can just about see, and a new feed line. I did originally want to run original Corsa line or original Vauxhall lines, but they just weren't working out, so I decided to just run new braided rubber fuel lines and two AN6 fittings. So fingers crossed they do the job just fine. Next we moved on to the wiring. Now this was a headache. I've done wiring before but never to this extent. So the body side ECU plug was repinned. We added in a barometric sensor and tidied up that loom, and then we took the 1.2 Corsa starter harness and the Z20 Lite starter harness, and we extended the battery cables and joined the two harnesses into one, and then we tidied up the engine harness because that was looking a bit old and tired. So all that's left now is to plug the rest of the plugs in. I need to run an earth from the ECU plate to the body, and then that is the wiring finished. In between waiting on parts, we got the gear shifter and cables all connected up. So now we've got gears, which is a good thing. And to go with the gears, we have drive shafts and hubs installed. Now these were a nightmare because it had to be steering knuckles from another car and then bearings and flanges from another car, so I could keep the 4 stud and run the Z20 Lite drive shafts. But try to find those individual parts were a bit of a nightmare, so that's why that took so long. But they're on, they're done. I need to swap over the brake calipers and then fire on new disc and pads, and that is the drivetrain sorted. Maybe. So that's where we're at right now. It might not seem like a lot of work, but the amount of work in those kind of couple of jobs has been immense and so time consuming, just waiting in parts, because I would start a job and then get stopped and need to order a part, and then that will come and then I'll crack on and then get stopped again and need to order another part. So it's been a lot of waiting about, a lot of trying to work things out, but we're now at a point where it's just fill the engine with oil, fill the gearbox with oil, put the wheels back on, and then we can turn the key and see what happens. So I'm going to quickly bolt the wheels back on, drop the car on the ground, and next thing you see is going to be me turning the key, and fingers crossed something happens. You ready?
Go for it.
None. None. Right, you ready?
Go for it.
Right, that was fuel pump. So, as you've just seen, the engine cranks, which is great, it's a good sign, but it doesn't start. So, after a bit of faffing about, we think we've narrowed down to the immobiliser. We think the engine's immobilised. So, what happens next? Now I need to get the key reprogrammed to match the ECU, so that the ECU recognises it, and then we can turn the key and fingers crossed, it fires into life. But until then, there's not really much I can do, so I'm going to end the video here, and all going well, in the next video we can hear this thing finally run. But until then, thank you very much for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.